Evergreen Media Network Studios, brought to you by Evergreen Media, creating cohesive marketing campaigns. Evergreen Media in Vero Beach.
This is On the Move with McEvoy. And now, here's your host, Carolyn McEvoy.
Hello, and welcome to our show today. We have with us Carrie Lester from the Indian River County Substance Awareness Center. Carrie, welcome.
Hi, Carolyn. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. We're glad you're here. We just wanted to highlight what's sort of an epidemic and all the positive news that's happening with counseling our youth and former addicts and getting them help and counseling. Carrie, tell us, what motivates you? How did you start in this business or what you're doing?
Well, it's funny you asked me that question. I tell people that my job as the executive director at the Substance Awareness Center is not a job I'd have chosen for myself. I feel like it chose me. And really, it was steered by my personal life path, my recovery journey. And I'm a licensed mental health counselor by training and certified addiction professional. And through my own struggles, people invested in me, and I've had the opportunity to have sustained long-term recovery. And people's investment, they saw potential in me. And so they kind of nurtured me along my path. And here I sit today leading, an organization in the prevention and the treatment of substance use disorders. So to me, it's an honor and a privilege to do what I do. I would have never seen myself doing this work, but I'm glad that I'm given the opportunity.
We're lucky to have you. And I wanted to ask, what's your biggest challenge? What right now is the latest, I don't want to say problem, or something you're trying to overcome with what you're doing in prevention?
I think we're bombarded in a society that has lots of different messages. Our kids are getting messages from so many different places. And we have a strong partnership with our school district. So we do a lot of evidence-based prevention programming in our schools. We have community partners we bring our programming to. And we partner with law enforcement to bring prevention programming into the office so that we can provide those services. Prevention science is actually a relatively new field. We've got about over 50 years of research that tells us what works and does not work in the name of prevention. And so a challenge on the prevention side really is a lot of times we do the wrong things with the best of intentions. We think scare tactics might work, I'm a kid of the 80s, so, this is your brain on drugs or just say no. The science really shows us that skill building's got to be a key component to the work we do if we want to prevent substance use disorders. And we've learned a lot in the last 50 years. We've learned a lot about brain development. We know that the brain is not fully developed until our mid-20s. And so we can provide evidence-based interventions that we know that, the research shows that there'll be outcomes in reducing the impact and likelihood of substance use among kids.
So the big thing you're saying is educating people to what to look for. And by people, we mean young people too, and sometimes even a young adult that's in process of using drugs or alcohol, and showing them what alternative pathways are to get rid of stress and to lead a good life.
Skill building is a key component to, overall health and wellness and success in life. There's an evidence-based program we use called life skills training. And as a clinician, my clients, when I would be conducting treatment groups, they'd be like, why don't we learn this stuff in school? And I would say, well, now you do. And so on the treatment and on the prevention side, skill building is a key component. And we really look at making sure that people, that our young people and that those who are entering recovery have good social skills, general social skills. What are the tools that they need to navigate in this world? Interpersonal skills, self-regulation, and we want them to have those drug-resistant skills.
Talking about the 80s and the Just Say No campaign, which some of us remember, and it seemed to work. How do you feel about that? We were talking before about things that are available now in gas stations, drugs that are available without even having to get it from somewhere else. What do you feel about that accessibility and how to counsel people about that?
I think a big thing that we do is, yes, we want to give kids good factual information. They need to know about the dangers. They need to understand the risks. But we always want skills to be a part of what we're arming our kids with to be successful in reducing the likelihood that they turn to substances. And we also want to arm our parents with good tools, resources, and information. And we have a campaign message out in our community now. It comes from the national government. It is Talk, They Hear You. And what's really important about Talk, They Hear You is the research is very clear that when parents and, adult caregivers talk to young people, they can significantly impact the likelihood of a young person trying substances and developing a substance use disorder. And so Talk, They Hear You really tells parents, you want to start that conversation. You want to start it early, as young as age 9 or by age 9. It could even be earlier. And you want to have a clear stance. You want your kids to know and understand what your clear stance is on teen substance use or underage drinking. And that's real important that we help our parents know how to have those conversations. And it doesn't have to be a big, heavy conversation. We can capitalize on everyday moments, that little ride to the school, moments in the car, moments at the dinner table, to just be able to impart wisdom and your clear stance and share knowledge. You
want to talk about your personal recovery journey, and that is one of your greatest successes. I've heard you speak before about that. Mm-hmm. Talk about that and why that makes you you're a healed healer, as they say. You have healed
I'm a work
yourself.
in progress.
You've come, you're the executive director, mm-hmm. and you're helping and changing a lot of lives. No one else can do what you do. You're steering the ship. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah. And what I would say is when we look at young people, we look at trying to reduce their risk factors and increase their protective factors. And I probably had a lot of protective factors in my life growing up. And some of my risk factors might be around genetics, and also just, I think I always had this underlying anxiety disorder. And so when, for me, not having good coping skills for anxiety, not having good coping skills for managing stress, anxiety, even anger, impulse control, those types of things. I didn't have those coping skills. I came from a very loving home, but there wasn't a lot of, education and talking around, those essential skills that I would need. And even, mental wellness. What do we do to stay well and take care of ourselves and not be stressed out? And so for me, I think when I found alcohol at a very young age, it did something for me that it did something greater for me than it did for my peers. And so that was something that I sought out. And, ultimately, we know substance use over time will change the brain. And so, I experienced that with a multitude of, battling mental health, depression, anxiety became a part of the puzzle, and an eating disorder for me. And when we look at those along the continuum of an addiction for me.
What was the moment? What was the moment, the transitional moment where it all changed for you? What was the catalyst? What happened?
I think it was the culmination of a lot of experiences, and I don't think it was of my doing. I do believe I kept showing up till the miracle happened. And
let me say this. Do you have a higher power? And do you think that was part of it, or was it just something else?
For me, faith is a big piece of my recovery. And it really is when I work with clients, we would talk about physical recovery, right? Like, we don't put the substance in our body, but how do you take care of your physical body?
Right.
Mental emotional recovery is really important. So how do you manage those emotions? How do you take care of those emotions? And then spiritual recovery, whatever that looks like for you.
Okay.
But, what is your sense of faith and hope in this world, or something bigger than you? And what do you turn to when you've got problems so big? And so I really learned, how do I turn over the things that I can't control? And that was a big piece of my recovery. And I feel like I was fortunate. I spent most of my 20s in and out of treatment. And so the opportunity to really be in a long-term treatment, have the opportunity to really practice the skills of recovery, have the support around me for the length of time that I needed, it helped kind of really connect those dots and finalize those dots for me.
So to sort of pull all these threads together,
mm-hmm.
You're a believer in long-term recovery, and the organization you're working with, I know you have goals for that. Is one of them also something to that effect? You have something in place for that, for people long term?
Yeah, one of our we do multiple programs. I talked a little bit about the prevention work we do, and the recovery work we do. One of our programs is a recovery assistance program, and so we. With the generous philanthropy in this community, we have 2 homes that men in early recovery can come into our homes. They can receive recovery support services. Some of them may need to engage in some of our treatment. We partner with United Against Poverty, help engage them in the STEP program. But these men can stay in our homes for the length of time that they need. We don't say the clock is ticking, insurance has run out, you've been here a year, you need to go. And
which
so,
is kind. Yeah, no, we're very generous community.
And it affords people the opportunity to move at their pace. We hold the men accountable. They need to be working on their recovery goals. Once they reach the phase of work, we want them to start saving money so that they can get out and launch into independent living, and we want them to have enough in reserves to be able to sustain that independent housing for themselves. But it takes time to really practice the recovery skills. It's really about learning a whole new lifestyle. I liken it to, I wear my watch on my left hand, and if I started wearing it on my right hand, it would be awkward and difficult. It would be hard for me to put it on in the morning. I'd be checking my other hand if I wanted to look for, and you get used to it over time. But we need to give people the time it takes to build the new pathways in the brain, learn the new skills, and the new way of coping and responding to life and life's triggers.
Yeah. So frustrations you have on the job, what would be one of them, or with society in general in helping your cause?
I started out, I said earlier, I wouldn't have chose this job for myself. It chose me, but I love my job. I feel honored and privileged to do what I do. Sometimes, I had the ability to work with clients and see immediate change or get immediate feedback of how I was making a difference. And so some days I get a little frustrated. Maybe I feel a little disconnected. We're dealing with systems now, trying to bring bring a system of care into our community, or dealing with the government, and how do we make changes or advocate for policy? And that can become frustrating. But my husband was the first to remind me once. He was like, Carrie, you get to impact people on such a larger scale with the work you do day to day. And so that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me going. And I'll say I probably haven't carried a client caseload in over 10 years, but I still get the fruits, the little notes, the little run-ins with people who will update me that they're still in recovery today, or how I impacted them, being their counselor. So that keeps me going too.
No, it's wonderful. So what does the future hold for treatment in your realm for drugs and alcohol? What you had mentioned, there's changes. I know physiology and, things like that. You were talking about changes in the brain. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little bit.
I think the future holds that this is still a relatively new field and new science that we're learning more and more every day. And we're really learning and understanding addiction as a brain disease and a brain disorder. And so for many years, we were treating, we treat disorders and we look at the organ which is most affected. And for the longest time, we weren't looking at the brain. But we do have brain imaging now that shows us what's happening in the brain when the brain is overtaken by addiction. And we know it's the reward pathway that is taken over by the substances of abuse, and that drive behaviors that people are really no longer, that the priority center is now motivated to believe that the drug is the number one priority. And so just as you pursue food when you're hungry, people pursue drugs at all cost because the brain's motivated to do so to keep them alive. And so we understand that we need to implement that in our practices.
So how do you achieve success? You have steps. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those.
So I would say at the Substance Awareness Center, it's really important that we are intentional about what we're trying to change, that we know what it is that we're trying to do when we implement a program. We don't want to make up what we do and say, hey, this sounds like a great idea. Right. Although we want great ideas, but then we go back to science. We look to say, okay, what's been working in this space? Are there any promising or proven programs in that space? And so we set a target. What do we want to change? We implement the program. If it's an evidence-based program, we make sure we're meeting fidelity. We have good supervision. And then we want to measure those outcomes. We look at those outcomes. We have a performance improvement team that looks at our data, says, hey, are there changes we need to make? Is the data telling us a different story? Or are we on target doing the job we want to be doing? And that's the way we define success. For me, though, I try to remember that, we're in the business of saving lives and changing lives. And so that's not always black and white. Our clients on the treatment side do have a brain disorder. And so a piece of what we're doing it sometimes is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And relapse isn't a failure of treatment. Sometimes it's a part of the journey. And we want to be there to support our people if they do relapse.
And there's changes. Florida is, it's a big state. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of headline news about drugs and alcohol. What are the changes and how is that positively affecting your job and your role?
I think, when I look at the data, sometimes it's negative, it's not always positive, but we are seeing that we're making positive strides when it comes to reducing overdoses. A big piece of that is the availability of Narcan, what we've done as a state, what we did here locally. And I will say some of my counterparts were like, how did you guys do that so quickly? And our partnership with Bay Street Pharmacy, we were able to work with the state pharmacy. Bay Street accepts Narcan kits and we disseminate them free in the community. And we want to see Narcan really be the CPR of overdose, so people understand how to recognize signs and symptoms of overdose, have Narcan on hand, and save a life. And so the good news is we're seeing some more lives being saved. Nationally, though, we did lose 110,000 Americans last year to overdose, so we still have a lot more work to do. Fentanyl does drive the overdose crisis, and I know at the federal government, I know that state law enforcement, it's a multi-tiered strategy to address what's happening with fentanyl and overdose. But I will say here in Indian River County, we work in a caring community of people who take time to come together, to look at the problem, to talk about the problem, and say, how can we support one another to make a difference? And I'm part of those groups. And our hospital district takes a lead, our sheriff's office, our hospital, and other providers come together to make a difference.
Now, if you had to give a personal message for someone out in our audience struggling with addiction, what would it be today?
It would be, you are not alone. And actually 1 in 2 Americans now says that they have a family member or friend, a close friend, who struggles with a substance use disorder. And so we know you're not alone and that there is hope, and we never give up till the miracle happens. I was in and out of 13 different treatment centers, and the first one, I didn't think I had a problem. I thought everybody else was overreacting. And by the last one, I didn't think there was any hope for me. And so, we just tell people to keep showing up. I was at the office last week, and a gal pulled me aside and she said, I'm here today because of you. You helped me 10 years ago, and I knew it was safe to come back and try again. And so help is out there. Help is available. There is a national treatment finder. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Agency has a treatment locator. You can reach out to our office if you're not local to Indian River County.
Can you give us those numbers? I mean, do you have anything to read off to us?
What I would say is reach our office. There is no wrong door. We will help anyone get to where they need to go. And
what is that address and phone number?
We are located at 1507 20th Street. Right downtown Vero Beach. Our phone number is 772-770-4811.
So maybe say that again.
772-770-4811. And our website is sacirc.org. And you can reach out and request help through the website also.
I'm allowed one goofy question, I think, in interview, and this is it. We have seen, I've seen and witnessed people with the food they're eating, they're very concerned about organics and what they put in their body. Unlike when we grew up, a lot of times, we didn't care so much. It was all about flavor and taste, and today everything's organics and where it's grown and sourcing. Is that affecting at all people's mentality with other substances? Or is that a non-issue? When they choose to party or do something else with recreational substances, does that not affect anything?
I'm a firm believer that food does impact, the science is clear that the food does impact our body. Sugar, there is sugar addiction. The chemical release of what happens with sugar and highly processed foods impacts our moods and our behaviors. Getting into recovery, we really encourage people to look at that physical recovery. What is it that I'm putting into my body? How am I fueling my body? And so I just always encourage people to take a look at how food will impact their moods and what it is doing to them, and how they can use food to support their recovery and support good moods and energy and lower depressive levels.
Very nice. Well, Carrie, what else can we talk about today? You've got organizational and personal goals. You have, what is your greatest success?
Oh, well,
so far.
My greatest success really is my recovery. That is something. I would not have the life that I have today if I hadn't had recovery. And I have to remember that on a daily basis and put that in the forefront, that my recovery comes first, that There's nothing I wouldn't have this job, my family, or any of the titles that I hold, be it wife, mother, executive director, counselor, if I wasn't in recovery. And so, for me, that's my greatest success. I put that first. Being named executive director really, is a success and an honor to lead this organization, and to really be a part of solving community problems. And I think for me, that's a big piece of what keeps me coming back to work every day is we work in a community of people who say, yeah, we want to make a difference. We want to come together. We want to work on that prevention side, and we want to make sure that there's access to care on the treatment side. And so we can see that happening. For those who aren't super familiar with our organization, our mission is to reduce the impact of substance misuse and behavioral health disorders. And the way we do that is through that prevention works. And I talked a bit about that. And, prevention, a wide scale, universal prevention program is just a good public health measure. And so the school district helps us do that. But we want to make sure we really saturate our community with prevention messaging. And so we do a lot of work on the community coalition side of things when it comes to prevention. And we work with law enforcement. When they identify kiddos engaging in a health risk behavior, they can get referred to our office. They don't have to get a fingerprint or an arrest, but we can put an intervention and a program in place. And I believe in the power of prevention and the partnerships that come with prevention. And then, of course, on the recovery side, people can and do recover, right? I'm here today. And so we want to share the hope and beauty that that's possible with the different types of programs that we offer. I mentioned our recovery assistance program.
Yes, you did.
But we also have a highly structured day treatment program, 16 hours a week of treatment services for people with substance use disorder or co-occurring disorders. We have an outpatient program that people will step down into, or if they have a milder substance use disorder, can come in. That one's much more flexible and less structured. We've got the recovery assistance program. And our peers do a lot of outreach in the community with our partners. They're out at the jail. They're over at our behavioral health center. We partner with The Source. We try to be out in the community with education messaging, opportunities, and that Narcan.
Now, other counties and statewide, do they have similar programs for people that they can also find through a national hotline or a state hotline? Or how would someone listening to this that's not in Indian River County get some help?
Yeah, if within our Treasure Coast area, if you call 211, you're able to get linked to services within the Treasure Coast area.
211?
211 will help link to services across Palm Beaches and the
no
Treasure
kidding.
Coast.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's neat.
It's a service referral, and they also accept crisis calls, crisis management. And I always like to remind people too, especially for those who are out there struggling, that 988 is our suicide and crisis prevention hotline. That number is manned 24/7, and anyone in crisis or contemplating suicide can call that number.
That is phenomenal. Well, Carrie, it's almost time to wrap up our program, so I would just like you to give your personal phone number, if that's okay. And I don't mean personal, I mean your work number. And again, the address of where you are, so anyone watching or listening can contact Carrie Lester.
Thank you, Carolyn. Our office number is 772-770-4811. And I encourage anyone, you can call that office. You can ask for me personally. If you reach out on the info on our website, those emails come straight to me, and I'll make sure that you either get a response directly from me or it gets diverted to the right team member. And I just can't say enough about the wonderful team, too, that we have. I didn't talk about them today, but I couldn't do what I do without the support of our staff.
No, I know that. I know you've got a great team, and we in the community are very grateful for you, for everybody there. And that's it for today. We thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity, Carolyn.
Anytime. See you soon.